Hex Talks, a show that explores the world of horror through interviews with filmmakers, actors, writers, and some truly unique individuals. I am your host, Laurie Brewster, and I'm a horror filmmaker myself, with 7 feature films under my belt. Together, we're going to learn more about the world of independent film and the incredible influence that horror has had over the lives of some truly fascinating individuals. So thank you so much, Emily, for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to chat. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure as well, because this show, I'm going to be speaking with artists at all types of stages of their career, from those at the beginning to those at the peak, and those trapped in the middle like myself. So, so it's really exciting to get a chance to chat to you about your experiences so far and what your hopes and aspirations are for the future as well. But I've got a list of questions, so we'll start with asking you a little bit about yourself. So here we go. I've got them here. I printed them. Emily Louise Knutsson. So
can't type them.
So tell us a little bit then about where you're from, your background, and where you're currently staying. But don't be too specific, because some of the guys that watch this, you can't trust them.
No stalkers this year. That's for last. No, I'm kidding. So I am originally from New York, right outside New York City. I'm not cool enough to be from the urban place, but suburban New York City, so close enough. And I'm actually quite lucky. I have dual citizenship, so I'm also Swedish. So that's where the crazy last name comes in. I mean, Knutsson doesn't just fly off the wall. It comes from somewhere. So that's made it moving to Europe really easy. So I go to the University of Edinburgh, and so I live there now.
So how do you find Edinburgh then? Are you enjoying it there?
It's wonderful. I mean, I study history, so it is one of the most epically historical places you can possibly live. I mean, it's filled with castles and medieval and Georgian architecture, which I love. But it's a bit cold. It's obviously an adjustment moving, all the way across the ocean and meeting new people and starting a new uni. But the acting is amazing there, and it's a nice place to live.
Well, that's right, because there's a lot of people that when they pursue acting, they would dream of being in New York, with like Broadway and so much theatre and things like that. Mm-hmm. But you're here in Scotland, in a land of rock-faced men,
And kilts. I mean, I've gotten that question so many times. So many people have said, why did you go opposite way? But I never really thought of it like that myself, because in my head, at least, I always wanted to do like Fringe. I always wanted to do period dramas and historical dramas, and Scotland is such a place of growth of, all that fantasy epics and, the medieval aesthetic and kind of Gothic things that have always been very present in my idea of acting and my imagination. So it only made sense kind of to move to the source and where a lot of that stuff was coming from.
Right. Well, yeah, that does make perfect sense when you consider that the actor is also an artist, and you want to immerse yourself in what stimulates your imagination and what excites you. So yeah, good for you. And I'm sure we will be seeing you in period dramas.
I would love that. I would love that. That would make all of the moving over here worth it.
So at the moment, though, you're a student of history. Mm-hmm. But you would describe yourself as an artist and actress. Your history is something that forms your art. Is there a part of you that still thinks sometimes, maybe I should be a teacher or do something else? Or are you like, no, it's art or nothing?
I would probably say the latter. I mean, I'm doing my dissertation. I'm kind of in the preliminary stages of finishing that up now. And I'm literally doing it on Gothic and medieval aesthetic in film. So I mean, the reason I love history is because, like, even in paintings, I'm like, oh, that could be a great story, or that could be a great role in a play. And Reading history, I'm really inspired by roles I could play. So I love reading about like really interesting and kind of complex and even evil women in history. And these amazing, I love reading about the royal court because obviously in film and television, the royal court is always portrayed so magnificently. So yeah, I would have to say the latter. I don't really think I could see myself behind a desk or really doing anything that isn't on camera.
Yes, I think often case the desire to become, well, in fact, it's not even a desire to become an actor or an artist. I think it's that it's simply a terrible fate. Once you're inflicted with it, it's hard to escape it. And so that's right. Because, you know, most people wouldn't choose a life of poverty and struggle. It's just, it
and
comes naturally with
inadequacy.
the terrible. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I mean, it's kind of like prophetic. You're like, I have to do this. I have to, you know, work. And I feel so bored when I'm not involved in a production. Like I get even lazier with my schoolwork. I'm genuinely like reading the articles and writing the essays. And I'm like, ugh, I wish I was doing something. But if I'm in a play or doing a film at that point, it moves so much quicker and it's so much more enjoyable.
Oh, sure. I mean, hell, sometimes they say that even the worst day in the arts is better than the best day, you know, in a call center, you know, or any day is better than the best day in a call center. Yeah. It's like, no,
Oh my God.
Oh God, no.
Are there best days in a call center?
So how long have you been pursuing art acting for then? Like a million years? I mean, you're like, you know, like 12 years old or something. So it must be like, how long?
I mean, that's actually a good question. I mean, I guess ever since I was little, I did ballet, and you can call that pursuing it because you're honing your skills and all that.
And, you know, I did amateur theater, of course, as a kid. And, you know, a lot of my family's been in music and arts and stuff, so it kind of makes sense. And then a few years ago, I really started to do more Shakespeare, and I started to kind of just teach myself and do programs. And I did a conservatory program with Stella Adler back in New York, which was phenomenal. And I really learned a lot about, you know, her technique and the way she thought. And then, you know, I love Chekhov. But then in the last, probably since I moved to university and moved to Edinburgh, when I've been on my own, I've been able to get as much work as I possibly can as an amateur, you know, without representation, you know, just trying to get, was in Fringe, and I was in a Hex Studio movie, which was wonderful.
Yeah, of course. You were amazing in that.
That was amazing. It was one of my, probably absolutely my favorite project I've been in so far. It was so fun.
So for the audiences at home, gosh, there's a few things you ticked there, right? So yeah, The Fringe is a whole series of theatre shows that happen in Edinburgh once a year as part of a big arts festival. And Stella Adler is an artist that's renowned for creating a school of performance, which we will actually talk a little bit more about then, because that's really interesting that you've drawn such influences from Adler as well. It's funny because in my experience, a lot of the American actors I've worked with, they love looking at those different fields, you know, from like from method to Meisner to Adler and things like that. Whereas in Britain, it's very much, you know, based on traditional technique, and sometimes that's a problem actually, because a lot of the American. Anyway, I'm digressing, but we'll get back to that. Good. Tell me a little bit more about the artistic inspirations and influences you have as an artist.
Oh, I mean, I think it started for me when I was really, really young, and my mom used to take me to art museums, and we'd go and look at all the paintings and all the statues, and I used to think, well, I could play that woman in the painting, and I could, you know, be in that story and that idea and that fantasy world that existed, you know, behind the oil painting. And I think it kind of went from there, and I wrote lots of stories as a kid, you know, with my own character, of course, being the main one. And then it kind of was always tied into academia, and it was always tied into literature. And it was, you know, like right now I'm reading Rebecca, and I'm so excited to watch the film after to see how someone else brought something like that to life and brought it to screen. And also, I just think the medieval aesthetic and Gothic aesthetics are so like enduring, and they're so culturally relevant, you know, from the Victorian age to even further back. And then today we have a million horror movies coming out, and it's so relevant and important, like the idea of witches and witchcraft and all of that.
And I think I've always felt a really deep connection with the Gothic thing. Maybe it comes from having dark hair and, the witchy look that I've always been told I have, but
I've always felt like that was what I was meant to do, and I love playing super dramatic roles and super like Helena Bonham Carter is one of my huge inspirations in acting, and that whole how much she delves into the characters and how intense she is something I really, really admire and want to bring to my work.
Oh, I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting as well, you were saying about the witchy look. I mean, you would be a very pretty witch, so that's good. Your career, I guess,
Mm-hmm. Ooh, scary.
But when you consider that witches in history were often demonized in a way that accentuated feminine qualities. So they were demonized for being sensual, independent, sexual, and emotional, and elemental.
Mm-hmm.
It's the things that I guess they were that caused fear among society at the time. But of course, those are, in my opinion, great ingredients for an actress. Of course, I'm biased, as all artists are. We have our preferred predispositions, But like originally, when I trained in acting and was mediocre at, as I went along the way, it did make me think that those performances that could maintain aspects of technique, but at the same time have a kind of uninhibited intellectual and emotional quality where you're expressing something deep and powerful that goes beyond you. And that's often what these things are, I think, like those kind of traits that witches were accused of. For an actress to become, say, elemental, like a force of nature, from her own inner strength, her own spiritual energy or artist energy and all those kind of things, when that can be achieved on screen or on stage, I think that is a transformative performance. It's something almost profound, and it really, makes people, jaws hit the ground. I think at the moment, some of the challenges with that style of performance is that what's very trendy often is a very detached style of performance. It might be like, instead of something, say, dramatic or emotionally intense or melodramatic, it might be, you looking melancholic by a diner window, sipping a cup of tea for 8 minutes to a slow electronic synth score, and it'll be like, that'll be Sundance.
There's something so wonderful, and like that's the whole realist approach to acting that's really taken hold in the last few years. And in that, I think there's something so wonderful at that as well, contrasting. And I think a lot of films today kind of combine the two, kind of the outlandish, super dramatic, Tim Burton-esque acting combined with like the very melancholic, staring out the window, very, realist.
It's funny, but like I would actually say that, and I'm not articulating it very well, but what I'm critiquing isn't even the realism. It's kind of like, in a way, it's its own form of melodrama, but contained within a hipster wrapper. So they're not acting any more human than someone that's being emotional or dramatic. They're being intentionally detached. Like, let's take for example films like Ghost Story, the A24 film, in which you have someone eating a pie in a cafe for like 12 minutes runtime, and no one's expressing any emotions, but everyone's also an asshole to each other in a kind of unfathomably unrealistic world in which everyone is an asshole. It's like it's as artificial as the emotional and dramatic world, but it has the pretense of reality because everyone, and particularly younger audiences of that variety, want to feel aloof and detached. I'm not affected by emotions. I'm too cool for that. Realism is an ephemeral thing.
It's definitely also very subjective. Everyone has a different idea of what they think a realism in a film should be, and yeah, there's definitely different film trends, but it all depends on the script and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, of course.
Mhm.
I personally, as an artist, I'm a romantic. So of course, as a romantic, I do place emphasis on emotion and drama. That's romanticism, you know, and I probably imagine that you have similar tastes. I think, like, you know, if your relationship ends, if you lose the love of your life, that's a dramatic event. It's the kind of thing that would have inspired some of the greatest pieces of classical music, some of the most wonderful works of art, brought from tragedy. Not a guy taking a slow drag of a cigarette to electronic uh, score for
That
10
makes sense.
minutes. Like,
Oh,
but people don't want to feel at the moment. They're embarrassed by emotion, unless they're getting angry on Twitter. So it's a strange thing, you know?
Unless they're slamming someone for on Twitter.
Right. You know, yeah. As an artist, then you always have this challenge when you're inspired by things that perhaps aren't in the immediate pop culture,
mhm.
to then try and affect that culture. Um, as a romanticist, that isn't, I mean, cool right now. That's seen as theatrical and old fashioned. Of course,
Mhm.
you know, things change again, and they always will. But as an artist, I like to try and think, right, how can I subvert the pop culture, or how can I try and do that? And of course, if it becomes, you know, the mainstream, then it will be the, you know, the hipster minimalists that will try be subversive with the detachment again. Ah, okay, I've got another great question here. On my paper. So, Emily Louise Knutsson, how would you how would
Yes.
you describe yourself as an actress?
Um, Probably very serious when it's necessary. I mean, I like to approach everything very pragmatically and very seriously. Like, if I'm learning an accent, I'm sitting and taking notes in front of a computer for a few hours to make sure it's correct. And if it's a historical character, I'm going to do the proper research, and I'm not going to like glaze over the top, and I'm going to know my lines. And I'm very I approach it as a job, because to me it's what I want to do, permanently, and I don't want to be unprofessional or inadequate in a profession that I'm really passionate about. But then more on the artistic side, that's more of like kind of the just work and boring side of acting. I would say historical, obviously I do history. But also I like to do quite a wide range of characters. Like, I find it really interesting and fun to play a very frail, like, quiet character. And then it's also incredible to play, a femme fatale or an evil queen, or, a wench, or, there's so many different things I like to do. So I don't like to ever say I do one style or one character, because the active transformation is one of the most fun parts of the craft.
Sure. So we could see you in Hedda Gabler as well as the Glass Menagerie then. Yeah.
I'll take any role. I'll do it. There might be more roles I'd like more than others, but at the same time, like, if it makes sense, or I'm passionate about just doing acting, so all of it's enjoyable. There are certain things I like, anything medieval or gothic, I'm probably like, oh my god, I'd love to do that. But of course, I love you learn from every project you do, and you become a better actor with every project you do.
Oh well, I'm enormously struck by your enthusiasm and even entrepreneurial attitude as well to developing the opportunities for yourself as an artist. And that is actually, unfortunately, something that isn't as intrinsically common in Scottish culture for many actors here as well. It's something that comes a lot more naturally to folks across the pond and even in Europe. So good for you. So if you're a Scottish actress, take note of Emily Louise Knutsson. And of course, you were fantastic as well in our film, and you put a lot of thought, a lot of effort, and a lot of patience as well, with very challenging shooting circumstances as well, when you played a supernatural goddess of the forest. So very good.
It was so fun, and like, even though I didn't even notice it was cold, it was just an amazing experience, and so amazing. So thank you for having me, because it was such a highlight of this year.
Oh, thank you. I'm just so glad you survived. You know, that was...
It was okay. You guys kept giving me tea. I didn't even notice it, honestly, till I got back to my flat, and I was like, it's bath time, because I am cold, but...
Yeah. So you take the makeup off and you're still blue, you know? It's like, oh God, no.
I had the fingernails on for about days and days. All the makeup stayed with me.
You could creep out your flatmates with your long nails. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a good actory question for you.
Okay.
So I've got down here whether there's any particular methods of acting that inspires you. Those, I guess, can range from, there's a million different fields of acting and ideas. You mentioned Adler before. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about your experiences with the Stella Adler workshop and any other ideas that inspire you.
So prior to kind of doing the workshop, I think I was 16 when I did it. So it was 4 years ago. So not that long ago. But I did that when I was 16 and 15, 16, around that time period. So 4.5, 5 years ago. And before that, I was really like, I'm going to go to acting school. I'm going to go to drama school. I really want to go to a conservatory program.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was kind of taking my exams at school and I was trying to balance like, which do I want to do? And I did a summer conservatory program that you had to audition to get into. And I completed it during the summer and it finished with a performance of Romeo and Juliet, in which I was Juliet. And
perfect, darling. Perfect.
And we did Chekhov's, which one was it? Three Sisters, and I was Irina in that.
Wow.
So kind of really great characters. And I learned a lot in the terms of Shakespearean background. I think that was the most beneficial thing I learned kind of from their technique. And they have a whole technique where they're very against method acting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with Adler,
yep.
They're very much, you create your own circumstances and you immerse yourself in that role. But at the same time, I knew after doing a whole summer with them that I didn't want to do a conservatory program because I also wanted to, because they were very strict on never getting a job while you're studying with them in a conservatory. And to me, I didn't want to cut off 4 years. Yeah, I was like, well, I want to do film and I want to do as much as I can in front of people. I don't just want to study for 4 years. So I did that program. I think I learned a lot, but I also was like, I'd rather learn on the job and work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're back now after a brief interlude because being a Scottish producer, I was too cheap to get the pro account for Zoom, which removed the limit on meeting times. But now we're back and I've got the upgrade. So there won't be any more bizarre interruptions. So we were talking about Adler and
yes.
what you were learning. Just to give folks a basic idea. So Adler and Stella Adler, Sanford, Meisner are both techniques that came about almost in reaction against Leah Strasberg and method. So you have method in one direction, and then you have Meisner and Adler, which use certain aspects of method, but take them in quite different directions. Meisner with impulses and instincts, and Adler is all about the power of the artist's imagination and lots of background research and work. And yeah, I think that. So there you go. It's everything you need to know, guys, about Strasberg Adler.
It's all you need. You never need to go. Don't read about it. You're fine.
So what attracts you to Adler then?
I think it was probably the proximity, living right outside New York. It was accessible, and it was a program I auditioned for and I got into. And I didn't know much about, I was 15 and a half, almost 16, and I didn't know much about their actor's imagination before I did the program. And it definitely taught me a lot of things I still carry into my acting, because I know you can take the method approach and you can think about things outside the circumstances, but that's never really worked for me. I prefer to immerse myself completely in the character. I think especially that, approach worked even with Dragon Knight, because I can't take any past experience and think, you know, how would I scream? I had to think, well, this is a crazy creature in the forest, and how would this creature be in this situation? You know, there's nothing and I think when you get into the more fantastical realms, you kind of have to do the actor's imagination technique. You can't really do anything else. So it was definitely a great program. And I think it was definitely essential as an actor to really ground I had been in some Chekhov and Shakespeare, but to really ground my knowledge in Shakespeare and Chekhov, as well as kind of more modern approaches with more contemporary works with the imagination. But I didn't want to sit at a conservatory during all of my uni and not be able to work on the side. So and I also was kind of developing more my own interpretation of acting, you know, combining history and literature with acting. So it helped kind of carve my own path and take my own path in acting rather than just going to a conservatory in New York. I felt like it didn't make sense for me.
No, of course. Yeah, because I guess every artist that does develop their own technique, you know, borrowing from bits and then creating their own parts as well. I think that's really cool with your particular interest and background, because I can see how that could shape quite a unique artist perspective on performance as well, especially the knowledge and interest in history and art and culture as well. I mean, these are the things as artists we have to feed our minds. Even it's not just creating out of nothing, you know, we need to draw from inspirations. And I think you mentioned earlier as well, it's particularly interesting as well that you're reading Daphne du Maurier as well, like with, for example, Rebecca. And
so good. It's excellent so far.
I mean, Daphne du Maurier is one of my favorite authors as well. She does write quite an intoxicating blend of strange situations, dark things, and wild emotions. Very good. And if you get a chance, my favorite Rebecca adaptation is the one with Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier from the 40s. It's really, really quite good.
Okay, I'll have to watch that one.
Yeah, but no, that's cool. She's written so many great stories as well. I think, in some ways, Daphne du Maurier and Adler go very well together.
Yeah, I mean, I got into the whole Gothic literature meets acting right after the Adler program, because it was that year, I think I was going to my junior year, so year 11 for the British term. I started to do my own personalized research. I was in this special honors class where I got to do my own project and completely lead it myself, like a mini dissertation for high school students. And I picked Bram Stoker's Dracula and how that relates to the Gothic aesthetic and what it says about society, and then how it's translated into film. So that was like, as a kid doing that, obviously when I look back on my research, it was more juvenile than what I'm doing at uni now, but it was the start of it's how what I used to get into unis, and I wrote in my essays, this is what I did and please accept me and stuff. So it was I've always been on this path of kind of taking the Gothic and then the academic and make it into performance, you know, trying to find a happy medium between all three.
No, quite right. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't do that. They wouldn't consider balancing different mediums like that. I think some of the problems with traditional technique, especially in British acting training, although yes, it can produce from time to time the Patrick Stewarts and Christopher Plummers and these great theatre actors, and like Helen Mirren and all that, they are often so focused on technique and expression and practice of the text that it doesn't leave the artist a lot of room for their own interpretation and imagination, you know, and so it can also affect the professional perspective of a lot of aspiring actors in Britain as well, where they think, well, when do I show up? What is my script? How do you want it performed? And and that's it. And they don't necessarily bring all the homework where they've actually thought about the character and how they're going to do it and everything like that. You know, they almost wait to be directed and told. That can be a challenge. That's probably alienated and offended all the British actors watching this. Sorry, guys, you know it's true.
I mean, reading was like one of my first loves. Like I still love reading beyond, and so even reading a script, you get to kind of take your own creative. But then I love also being directed. A lot of people say, "Well, why don't you do directing? You seem like you do all this stuff," and I'm like, I
don't want to have the final lens on it. I love deferring to someone who is an authority in that respect, because my perspective is not the only perspective on the writing, just like Rebecca can be interpreted a million different ways. So I love, you know, bringing my own thoughts, and then I also love bouncing them against all the other creatives in the room, because that's when you get something really unique and special.
But you are, I
Like being
hear,
told what to do
directing
sometimes.
something,
Like,
all
it's
right?
fun to.
That's actually funny. So I wrote a short film that took place in the 40s, and I produced and starred in it, but I actually brought on a director, a friend of mine at uni who does English, and she's done directing and stuff. And I think I kind of had the final stamp of approval with many aspects, just because it is my script, but also
Her directing expertise was so necessary, and so welcome to have, like, someone else saying, I don't like when you do that, but it's great when you do that. And to have another perspective was so helpful, because also my wonderful co-star in it, he also, it's hard to direct
and be in it in the scene, and it was great to have that type of help too. But yes,
Of course. I mean, it's hard to see yourself on camera as well. I mean, you know, so you just to have that extra reassurance that someone's like, yeah, you look good.
I love
you have to do it again.
I actually really like watching on camera, because I like to see what I can do better. I find it really great, versus when you do theater, you don't have any frame of reference except the audience is clapping, which is great, but also you're like, oh my God, how can I make it better if there's nothing to watch back and bounce off and all of that stuff?
I think it's healthy to do that. Though I know very many actors, in fact, possibly most, that do not want to look back at their rushes or anything like that.
Sorry, you buffered just for a sec.
You missed me saying the most profound thing on the 21st century. Well, I guess that would only be like a month or 2 days or
This decade.
it's like, yeah, in the last 5 days, the most profound. Oh, that doesn't sound so good. Never mind.
This decade.
I was basically saying that most actors I know can't really tolerate looking at their rushes. So some of them do, and you know, they'll hover around the camera if they get the opportunity to take a peek. And I think it's quite useful for actors, because it's good to become familiar with your own foibles and habits, and then it helps you to kind of iron out things you don't like. But for some of them, it's just so emotionally crippling. Like, so I can't bear to look at myself. No, you know, just want to cry in a corner after looking at a take. It's like, is it going to be okay? So it's like, yeah, it's a strange one.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first film I did, like, with actual people, that wasn't just me running around my house being like, take me, was probably when I was like 13, 14. I did a film, and I watched it back, and I was like, oh my God, we need to fix some stuff. And then going into
the film I did myself with it's called MTV, is the little mini company I have, but it's obviously super mini.
And our film is called No One to Nothing. And watching it, and even going into the filming process, I was much more confident, just because I had already bombed a few film projects in the past. So I really was, and then obviously you do retakes and you redo it. But going into this, I think I felt a lot more confident because of my very critical eye in the past years, and knowing like, okay, don't do this, but please do this as well.
No, good for you. I mean, it's the only way to improve as well, is to be, in my opinion anyway, to be open to it. God. And, you know, I'm sure you haven't bombed as badly as I have in some things that I was in. I remember I was in a short film that got shown once at a university that I was in the senior year of, and oh, it was so bad. It was so bad that...
I'm sure it was great.
No.
It couldn't have been that bad.
I wish it was. It was so bad that the lecturer had tears streaming down his face.
Oh my God.
I was sitting next to him, and I was like, oh no. I was like, he's literally crying.
Oh my God.
He was like ready to explode, you know, and I was like, you know, and I said to him, I turned to him when he was ready to burst into tears. I went, and that was the best take, you know, and that was it. Then he just lost it. Like, had to go outside. Yeah, that was... That's a short film that no longer exists, I think.
I'd love to. That should be Hex Studios' next project, is release that and just
No!
publicize.
I think I get humiliated enough every day without that being in the public domain, but oh my God.
It's beautiful. I'm sure it's stunning. It's kind of... couldn't have been that bad. Moved him to tears. It couldn't have been that bad.
Yeah, it would have been beautiful from a certain point of view, one facing away from the screen, you know? It's like... So,
Oh my God.
I've got a wonderful question for you here. So I think this one's going to be pretty self-evident, but actually, is an actor just a performer, or are they an artist?
I mean, I would obviously have to say both, because I think my love of it came out of
Just loving to be in front of people, and I love being on camera. I find it so fulfilling to just be performing on camera. I find it just so fun and invigorating, and exciting. Like, it brightens my whole week if I get to do a scene on camera. But then also, obviously, there is the artistic side. All of that before performing is so artistic, I think, because all the prep and research, really, you have to approach it in an artistic and a professional lens. But yeah, I guess in essence it's performing, but I guess it's both. I don't think you can really be a performer without being an artist, because then you're not a very good performer.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. So I'll go to the next question, which would be, what would be your favorite role? What would be the perfect Emily Louise Knutsson role?
Interesting. Interesting. The perfect role would probably be
something with kind of a Gothic medieval aesthetic, for sure, from either in the costuming or just the general spooky atmosphere, because I mean, it can be actual period piece. Any of those elements I love in a production, so anything including those.
And probably a woman who is both sensitive and aggressive and delicate and upset and passionate. I think the really multifaceted kind of roles set in a Gothic setting will probably be my absolute favorite. Other ideal roles would definitely be like Anne Boleyn is one of my favorite historical figures, or Margaret of Anjou or Isabella of France, really controversial and kind of morally gray area women that I find really, really great to play. As well as, like, I love just the fantasy of those costumes and really stepping into a role and really becoming something else. It's such a great question, because there's also so many roles I'd love to play. Like, I'd love to also play myself in something, or, a university student who is maybe more bookish than I am and more shy, and to do a completely different type of role. But if I had one role left in my entire life to choose, it would probably be like an incredibly Gothic heroine that's very dramatic and emotional, because I think if you only have one role to play, you might as well play like your utmost fantasy. But at the same time, I think any multifaceted, complicated role would be amazing.
I think that sounds really cool. Yeah, so we could see you as there's a whole range from there. Some really interesting suggestions, and I guess part of the fun of that as well is, with the power of imagination, you could almost feel like you are, well, it may be perhaps too crude a phrase to use to say role playing, but to make that reality out of something so intense, wild, imaginative, and different, that is really cool. Especially to play someone with such a range emotionally as well, swinging between those kinds of feelings, and from kindness to ambition to love to hate to all those things. That's certainly something that the Gothic subgenre offers as well, because it does idolize those feminine traits and kind of elemental feminine traits as well. So we could see you as Catherine in Wuthering Heights, for example, and things like that.
I love that book. Oh my gosh. I mean, absolutely. And also, God, another thing I always read in history is that, like, women who exhibit both super masculine traits and super feminine traits are often like the most vilified, like hypersensuality and then also hyper ambition are often the same woman in a lot of history books, and then they're often portrayed as like
the most demonic creature of all time, like a she-wolf. And, you know, I did a project over the summer about demonized women in history, and all of them kind of were excessively feminine and excessively masculine. And it always makes me think of like Macbeth's line, like on Sex Me Here Spirits, because it's like the most famous line, but it's also like Lady Macbeth was so great because she was so feminine as well, and manipulative, and all of those amazing traits you can bring into any role, especially like medieval regal kind of royal roles often offer that type of thing, but also, you know, red people in the court or peasants, all of that offer incredibly complex lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say Lady Macbeth myself, but like, yeah, she perfectly expresses what you say about the masculine and feminine extremes. And it's an interesting thing that those qualities can be demonized in terms of how we portray villains, but at the same time, they're such charismatic villains. You know, in a way, if we take, for example, the play Macbeth, Lady Macbeth is a more interesting character than Macbeth, you know, but I feel like she's probably achieved an ascendancy over Macbeth over time, you know, as we've thought more and more about what went into her character, you know?
Because she was more, I guess, because groundbreaking, because a guy, you know, killing a king to be king is something that was written in history books a million times over. But at the same time, Lady Macbeth was groundbreaking in Shakespeare's Macbeth, but also it could have been linked to Margaret of Anjou. It could be, she could be inspired by so many characters because we have no idea what was in his head. When, you know, Isabella of France, she could have been related to, could have been any of them, you know?
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, she's such a great god. She's an amazing character.
Yeah. That'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see you perform that monologue. That would be cool.
Very fun.
Let's see, what do I have? Oh, I was in Macbeth, by the way. I played, though, oh man, I played Malcolm. So that's like the most, like, forgettable character with the most lines.
No. I saw Shitface Shakespeare's Macbeth, which was great in the 2019 Fringe. That was fabulous.
Oh, hey guys, look, here comes Malcolm. Hi, hey everyone. I have a monologue with lots of lists.
Oh, it's great though. Any roles you can make fun. I mean, I think I read something somewhere that like Jimmy Stewart became famous because he had one line in a play and because he delivered it fantastically. Everyone loved him.
Well, I mean, like Malcolm has loads of lines. It's just that they're all really boring lines. You know, that's the problem. Yeah. Plus, so for reasons beyond my control, I was late for costuming, and for some reason, costuming department had made all the other guys look amazing, right? They all look like cool warriors, but I ended up looking like Robin Hood from Mel Brooks' Men in Tights, you know? Like, I was like, what the hell? Why don't I have armor? Why do I have green tights? What? Who's this guy supposed to be?
They styled you very well. You were very on trend. You were like TikTok appropriate.
Like postmodern, here before my time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're ahead of the curve.
That show was so bad that that Macbeth had, poor guy playing Macbeth had to call for line quite a few times. Sometimes the audience would finish his line before he could, you know, that was painful. Never mind.
I think forgetting a line is unforgivable. I mean, in film, obviously, if you forget a line, you just do a retake, but in theater, you cannot do that. Oh my gosh. Yikes.
So we come to our last question for you now. Drum roll. Oh gosh. What projects are you working on now, and what have you got coming up?
Let's see. I have my first short film that I wrote and produced and starred in coming out. The trailer will be releasing in January, but we might submit it to some festivals, so we don't know when we're going to actually release the entire film. It'll obviously be sent to my friends, but not publicly because we're a little bit worried about festival submissions. But the trailer will be releasing, I think, January 17th publicly, so we're very excited for that. And we are planning on doing a 60s inspired short film, and hopefully I'll be in some more Hex Studio things, but I don't know.
Oh, of course. I'm sure you will.
Right now.
Of course. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to say hi to Emily Louise Knutsson?
My email is just emilylouiseknutsson@gmail.com, and my Instagram is at Emily Knutsson. What else is there? And if you want to catch MTV's trailer coming up soon, we're just MTV on Facebook or M_television on Instagram.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Emily, for chatting with me today. And of course, I know I'll be seeing you again anyway, but thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be on here. It's a privilege.
Oh, you'll learn what a privilege it isn't. Don't worry.
No, it's for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
And my pleasure. You have a wonderful day, Emily. Bye.
You too. Stay healthy and safe. And Happy New Year.
Be sure to hit subscribe and the bell notification icon so you don't miss any of our future videos. Also, if you would like to support our channel and help us make more content, then check out the Patreon link in the video description below. Thank you and goodbye.